I will just say we're
We're
live.
alive.
Yeah, we're live. We're live, and we're joined this hour by Shihan Cleef, who is a poet, a spoken word artist, a touring artist, a producer of shows, a venue host, just a legend in the poetry game. I'm very, very, very excited to have him here this hour. So Shihan, before we get started with all the things that you're all the things you've made a name with, can we start in the beginning? Like, how did you start getting involved in spoken word poetry?
Geez. Involved in spoken word poetry. Um, I had just moved out here from New York, and I was, I mean, it's such a weird fucking road. Okay, so I was signed to a record deal at Universal, MCA at the time, and MCA wound up getting sold to Seagram's, and then Seagram's sold to some Japanese company, and everybody got dropped. And so while I was going through the what the hell am I gonna do now that the deal's done, my best friend at the time OD'd, and I just went through a whole emotional fucking uh, roller coaster of shit of sorts. And my one of my friends I call my brother, he wanted to take me out to a club. So we went out, and when we got to the club, they wouldn't let us in because I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and you can't wear jeans and a t-shirt in the club, which is stupid because if you're gonna dance, you shouldn't be dressed in a fucking suit. So anyway, my brother went inside. My brother went out and left me, and so I walked across the street and I saw a poet, D Knowledge, who I'd read in an anthology and saw on Showtime at the Apollo, and I was like, oh shit! And I walked across the street. There's a spot called the Juke Joint. It was $2 to get in. I paid my $2. I got inside. I just sat and I just watched poets read. And Ronnie, who ran this collective called Ronnie's Backstreet Poetry, asked me if I wanted to read, and I was like, no, I just interested in hearing stories. And I just fell in love with that kind of storytelling, like hearing the stories out loud and hearing the personal narratives of people. And uh, at the end of the night, my brother came back in and he signed me up, and that became my ritual. So basically, every Thursday, I would take the bus from 106th and Broadway all the way up to Melrose, right off of La Brea, and I would just do poems and listen to poems, and that's where I met Dante Bosco and poetry, Smith, Jerry Quickly, Harley Searcy. I mean, there were so many poets at that time, and yeah, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with a group of people telling stories to each other. That's basically what it was and how I looked at it.
Yeah. So, part of what we're trying to do is to gather kind of oral histories of different like venues, presses, groups, collectives, etc. So, can you tell us a little bit about before you and Dante and later Poetry and Jamel like formed the Poetry Lounge. Before that happened, you were just like kind of going around to different venues. So, what were some of the venues when you first got started that you were frequenting at
Oh
that time?
shit. Oh god. Well, it was Fifth Street Dicks. It was World Stage. Uh, there was a spot called the Yaya Tea Bar, and shit. Oh, 33 and a third existed at that time, but that was later in the 90s. That was like late. When I got started, it was early 90s. That was late 90s. And then there were ones that just didn't have names. So there used to be, um, I would go because Jeff McDaniel used to run the Venice Poetry Slam and the Slam team out of Beyond Baroque. And so he used to always invite me to that. He's like, you should totally try Slam. And I was just like, no, I don't care about competing and getting with poems. And he's like, no, you really should do it. You should really try. And I went and I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to do it. Went down to compete. And uh, the poet, it was funny because the team we made, right? We made a team and it was Best Kept. Best Kept was our team. And myself, and there were some other poets I did not know. And then the team folded. They were like, oh, we're not going to send the team to nationals. And he wound up, he was a teacher, a professor at Sarah Lawrence, so he wound up moving back to New York to teach. And so there was just no slam. And so it went back to doing just open mics. And so they had readings, and I can't remember all the names because there were so many freaking different things, but they all were kind of, they were all ran by old. That sounds fucked up too. They were all ran by old people. They were
Yeah.
all ran by people who were. There were no teen spots. There were no. The youngest spot was probably something like The Good Life, but that was like an MC spot, so it wasn't really like that open to hearing poems from poets, you know. And at that time, a lot of the freestyle fellowship, like there was just so much of a certain sound that was going on that if you weren't really doing that shit, they weren't really fucking with it. And so, yeah, those were the spots that I remember that we used to go to.
So in those days of Good Life, were those like the please pass the mic days? When like someone would rap and like it was like please pass the mic.
Oh yeah, yes.
Did you ever see that happen to anybody?
I mean, but it's so fucking, you know what I mean? It's so long ago.
Yeah.
I just remember what that was like. And then of all the shit I remember, one of the things in Good Life that I do remember was a dude that I went to college with. This is just dates everything. Was going to college with, and he used to dress up like full on with like a suit at school and shit, dress up and shit. And he was like a dude from Good Life, and he wound up getting signed and coming out with, I wish I was a little bit taller. I wish I was a baller. And I was like, that's so crazy. That fool got signed. So, like, it was just a weird time because I think at that time also music was having this huge resurgence. So it wasn't like LA wasn't the poet, like how I viewed it, you know, being in it. It wasn't like the poetry scene. It was like there were poetry pockets, and then music was having this big ass thing because there were all these, you know, hip hop spots, and that was kind of the thing. And I wound up getting a deal through that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It was just a different kind of scene.
Yeah. You went to college with Skilo?
Yeah, Skilo.
All right.
Yeah. At El Camino College.
That's wild. That's wild. All right. Okay. So one of these venues kind of like that's come up a lot. Definitely Fish Street Dicks. I've heard about that before. That's come up some. But 33 and Third, that seems to be a venue that a lot of people talk about. A lot of people remember. Can you tell us a little bit about before we get into like the bulk of this? Can you tell us about 33 and Third?
Yeah, 33 and Third was ran. It was on 6th. I'm pretty sure it was 6th Street, Koreatown, downtown, and it was ran by Jerry Quickly and a friend poet from New York, and he had a spot there, and it was in the Luna Cafe. I think it was the Luna Cafe. I'm almost positive it was Luna Cafe, and he had been inviting me down to the spot, and at that time there were two people he wanted me to see, right? And it was Best Kept and Sekou, the Misfit, Sekou Andrews. And he was like, you just come down here and check these dudes out, blah, blah, blah. And I went down, and the first time I go to see the show at the spot, he cut Sekou off. So like Sekou's performing, I guess he was going along, and he cut him, and I was like, what the fuck? Because I hadn't really seen people get cut. Yeah. And I was like, what the fuck was that? And so he's like, he's really good, just sometimes he goes a little long. And I was like, okay, well, I was into it. But, and then Best Kept. And so, yeah, and then from that's how I met Best Kept, and he used to bring Best Kept. That was like 98? That was like 98. And he started bringing Best Kept to the lounge. And that's how me and Best became cool and closer because of that. And it was like more like a hip hop poetry spot. And Jerry, to me, just it's his New York vibe, and I'm from New York, and it was like it felt good to be in a spot like that with someone who just had this edge to him, was a dope ass poet, people respected, and ran his thing properly. Like it was just solid, And I think when I saw that, I was like, this is like a moment. That's the best way I could explain his spot. It was like a moment. And like I always remember the moment, and I felt like the lighting and like it just had something going on. And I don't know if maybe it's me thinking back and creating this magical moment that it was, but I think it definitely was something. And Jerry and I, still talk to this day, and still cool, and someone that you know inspired me in a lot of ways, just because he was doing shit in multiple circles, right? So he was like in the poetry scene, and he was respected by the older poets. He
Yeah.
was respected by the elders and the academics and that kind of stuff. But then he could go into the hip hop spot like at Fedoto's. I completely forgot. So like Fedoto's, and kill a spot at the poetry at a MC shit, and people would be like, oh shit, no matter what. And
Yeah.
that was really dope to see, especially at that time, because there
Yeah.
was such a delineation between the two. That they definitely made sure it was a difference and kept them separate.
Yeah. I heard he's working with Philip Glass now.
Yeah, he is. He's done.
It's crazy.
I don't know if he's done two. I think he's done two. I think he's done two things with. So I mean, he's worked with him for years, but I think he wrote one full piece, and then he was writing a second one. He's dope, dude. Jerry, to me, to this day, like there are people, and this is like most people. I think poets find their groove, they find their voice, and they know how they want to share stories, in what way, and what voice they're going to use, the language they're going to use. And Jerry, to this day, does it like he was doing it, but it still works. There are people where you listen to shit, you be like, oh boy, oh, this sounds like 1994.
Yeah.
When he does his thing, I'm like, he's still kind of fucking fresh, dude. You know what I mean? Yeah, we're older now, and it's a different thing, but I'm like, he's still relevant to what he, in his thing. So yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so you see these different venues, you're kind of inspired to start your own thing. It starts from a couch, or it starts from a living room, or what story?
It's kind of a weird fucking thing. So
story origin.
So the lounge it was kind of like a weird kind of setup. So the way the lounge, okay, we all were doing stuff separately. Like the poets, because the way Ronnie Walters, who started Ronnie's Backstreet Poetry, the way she was she had her collective, and Dante Poetry, Jamel, like all the people, Jerry Quickly for a while, El Rivera. I mean, there were a lot of people who were in it and around it and rotated in and out of it at various times. Her thing was very much about getting people to see poetry beyond Olympic Boulevard. Now, for people who don't know what that means, when we got in the scene, there was this definite feeling that poetry above Olympic, north of Olympic, was not real, right? Because it was closer to Hollywood. It was like they did shows at the nightclub or at a dinner, and I'm like, it's still a fucking story, right? So she was definitely about that. And the one, I want to bring this up before I bring up the lounge history, because I think it's very important to tell. Ronnie Walters did a show at House of Blues. It was the first poetry headline show at House of Blues, and she sold it out. And that was a big fucking deal, because that venue wasn't letting poets into their space. And the fact that she booked that shit and sold it out, and so many people had issue with it. There were people from down and below, I'll just say below, just not to call, because I don't think it's important to call names, below Olympic, that literally were there in front of it, telling people not to go inside. Like, don't do that. That's bullshit. That's not real poetry. Like that. That was crazy. So she was always trying to find it and put it in places it had not been. Because keeping the secret of poetry to yourself doesn't do shit. You know what I'm saying? If I'm just sitting on a book of poems, it's dope that I was able to get that out and have it.
Yeah.
But what does it do for culture, for people who might need to hear that, who need to know these feelings and thoughts and experiences exist? And she was really about trying to get poetry to different places. So we did shit at like restaurants. She got me my first show at Occidental College. Then she got me a show at UCLA. And that was like a big deal at that time, especially at that time. And to get $100, I thought I was fucking killing it. I was like, $100? Like, I was so fucking excited. And so going back to us starting the lounge, we were kind of doing things all separate ways. And we realized that that's not the best way to build something. We needed to have a core, a group that was doing stuff. So initially it started with Dante and I was doing a spot at the Century Club, right? 90s Century Club, hip hop. It's a club. It's a straight up nightclub. And I asked Dante, I'm like, yo, they want to do a poetry spot. We should do it because at that time we knew each other's work where we could do like this and tie in sets together. So we could do a full set on the work and we knew when to bounce in, what poems could go after this and da. And that's what we did. So we went to the spot, to Century Club, and the dude was like, look, so we can't turn the music off. We're going to give you guys some microphones and you just do your thing. And I'm like, what the fuck? And Dante and I literally walked around to tables and read poems to people, like at a table. And that's a difficult thing to do because what that showed us, though, in that moment was that it meant enough for us to do it. So as embarrassing and weird as that shit is, the fact that we still stayed with that and did that showed that it had value. So then Dante was like, dude, that's
what mariachis do at Mexican restaurants,
Exactly. So we were the poetry mariachis of 1990s, 60s, 77. So Dante, we started doing stuff at a couple restaurants. There was a spot called Bistro 829 on La Cienega. It was across the street from the Shark Bar. And he started doing an open mic there with his cousin, who was the DJ, Blas. And he'd be like, yo, dude, I can't do this by myself. Can you come and host? And I hated hosting at that time. And we started doing stuff and I would go help. And then it started to move around. And he goes, dude, I think we should call Jamel and Poetry up. And we met at Johnny Rockets at the Beverly Connection. And where the Johnny Rockets is at the Beverly Connection now isn't where it was when we had the meeting, which is kind of weird seeing that they built another one, but just in a different area. So we met at the Johnny Rockets and he goes, dude, I think we should do this shit together. We're all kind of doing stuff. She and I have been doing this thing. And, what do you think we should call it? And the old flyer had DPL on it, and it was Dante's Poetry Lounge. And we're like, it could fucking stay that DPL because it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? We're doing it together. And we cut the ante off or the ante, and it became the, because it was still the 90s, and we thought that shit was fresh. We're like, the Poetry Lounge. And so that's how it fucking started. And it started in a living room. That was part of it. It was at the cigar room at the Stinking Rose on La Cienega. So the Stinking Rose used to let us use the back room, and we would have circles. So it would be smaller at that point. But then when it went to the house, it was five of us. It might have been 6 of us living in that house. Like I lived in the living room. Manny lived in the dining room. Dante, Darian, Dion, and Reg. Yeah, there were 6 of us. So 6 of us lived in that house. And people would come over on Tuesdays, and because the biggest space to get together was the living room, I had to move all my shit on that day. So I had to move all my shit out the living room, out of my room, so that we could have an open mic. And at a certain point, there were so many people in the house that we had to move. It was just, there was a point, there was like 70 people in the house. And as cool and as vulnerable and as communal as that is, and cool as that is, 75 people in your house that you don't fucking know.
Yeah.
People are in other people's rooms and shit starts missing. And we didn't want that. So we winded up moving to the Pan Am Cafe, which was on 3rd Street. I think it was on 3rd, right off of La Cienega. And then we moved to the Zoo Theater, which was on Cahuenga. And then we moved to the official, what we start, dating the lounge. In 1998, we moved to the Cabaret Cafe on Cahuenga and Yucca. Yeah, and we were there for 2 years before moving to Greenway Court Theater. And we got to Greenway Court Theater because at that time, poetry was always playing basketball, and I think it's important to mention, poetry was an athlete. Seeing him now, he's like poetry, but he had a full ride scholarship for basketball to Knoxville College, went to school for basketball. And so when he used to always play basketball at the Hollywood Y MCA, and at that time, Pearson Blades, who was building the theater at the time, building Greenway back up, was like, hey, we're going to be opening in theater. We'd love to have you guys come. And we were like, we like the cabaret. And then the cabaret cafe owner, when he saw all the people showing up, started doing some shady shit in regards to money.
Yeah.
And we didn't like that. So we literally closed down on a day we came to the lounge. This is how we went this is the day we went to Greenway. We got to the lounge and there was a sign on the front of the space that said, starting tonight, there will be a fee of this. You'll get a drink ticket and blah, 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 blah. And this will be the new thing. Signed Dante Poetry, Jamel, and Shihan. And we're like, what the fuck? And we didn't even open that night. We're like, we're closed. And that following week, we opened. That was June 2nd of 2000. And we moved to Greenway.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That guy fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so actually, with your you talking about the 90s and it reminded me that I forgot to do this. This is a Center for the Arts production, the signature speaker series. The Center for the Arts is a not-for-profit in Pomona, California. We service Pomona, the surrounding area, and now the world's on the internet. We service the world. So we got to a different kind of way. The NCE fell off our sign. And that's how we became the DAW. So there are many roads to DAW.
There you go.
Or duh.
There you go.
Anyways, I was supposed to
do that. That's dope. Okay.
Got it in. Yeah. So let's talk about the Greenway Court Theater. I mean, like I was gonna ask you more about that previous venue, but after hearing that story, fuck that guy. Let's hear about the Greenway Court Theater and kind of what was it like moving in there, and then. And was your crowd already that big, or did it expand once you moved there?
We were super nervous. I mean, because the Cabaret Cafe was a cafe, right? Yeah. So it was all couches. So everyone sat at the couch or standing. So it was either standing room or couches. And we would get about 100 something people in there on a Tuesday. But when we went to the Greenway for the first time, we're like, this shit is humongous. Because you see it with all the seats and all that stuff now. But literally, the stage wasn't there, right? It was a circular stage in the middle of that in that space. So those chairs and all that fills up so much space now that you can't really see how big it actually felt. So we went inside and we're like, fuck, do you think we could do this? And we're like, well, we're opening on next week. So we got to figure it out. And at that point, internet wasn't really popping like it is now, so we were calling. That was it. It was like, hey, so we're doing a lounge next Tuesday. We're opening at the Greenway Court. So it was just a million phone calls, passing out flyers. This is the new spot. Da, 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 da. And the first night, I still have pictures. We have pictures from the first night, and we packed it out the first night. And we're like, oh shit! And it looked so crazy. And we had inflatables, so because they didn't have all chairs, they didn't have enough. So we had bought inflatable chairs. Like we went and out of our pocket just, put fucking seats everywhere, and we were just excited. We're like, fuck, we did it. And it was just like this moment. Again, I always think of the moment. It was just a moment where we're like, yo, we filled this shit. Like on a Tuesday night, there's like 200 fucking people in here to listen to poems from young people. There were some older poets, but it wasn't like before where it was they ran the list. And it was like one person they'd let in that was young. All of a sudden, it was all young voices and a couple scattered fucking older people. So we stayed there and we had a great situation. At that point, we didn't charge to get in. It was all donation based. And then it was a year or so. And later we started doing like slam shit. Then we would charge on the slam night, like $2. And I keep shit. So like I have like, in the garage flyers from that, like the first slam, $2. Then I remember raising it to $3 and us being worried about charging $3 because we're like, well, $3 is closer to $5. And, people are like, oh, well, I don't know. And we'll make excuses not to fucking pay. And then I remember, and that's the thing with running spaces is you're unsure. And as artists, until you find your groove, it's hard to determine the value of what it is you're doing because there's no mechanism in place to go, oh, this is worth this, right? So like providing a space just for people to share stories is something where you're like, $5 doesn't sound like a lot if you go, I spent $10 to go to the movies just to get in. That didn't include a snack that they charged me $7 for and a $5 drink and a whatever. So when we started looking at it like that, we're like, dude, it's fucking $5. Like, if people are gonna trip over $5, then they don't necessarily need to be coming to the lounge. And yeah, there are people who can't afford it, and we who didn't have money could come and just give what they had or give what they felt they were able to give at that point. But we definitely started thinking about like, people should see the value of what this is. This is important, especially because I don't think now, when you look at now compared to then, it's hard to imagine in LA where there were like 3 poetry spots. You know what I'm saying? And not to discount, some of the spots that were like east of the 110 or south of the 91, because at that point, because we remember when they built the 105. We remember when there was no fucking 101. I lived on 106 in Broadway, and we're like, yo, they're building a fucking freeway, and then they were filming Speed, and we're like, yo, they just fucking did a bus on the fucking fake freeway. So, you know what I'm saying? So That's what I mean about, it's just a really interesting thing to see. But it was really very few spots, and very few spots with young people. Like, it was, the lounge, there was I'm trying to think up the things that were up. There was oh shit. There was a woman who ran. Then there was Monica. Oh my God. This is what age does. There were poets that were in like the Pasadena area. There was stuff in the Valley, also ran by older poets. Then in Hollywood, it was like the lounge. Then below Olympic, you had like the stage. You had Project Load. You had Fifth Street Dicks. And then I can't remember dating now when it was that Fifth Street Dicks was done, but there were very few spots. Like Project Load, Good Life were like the youngest spots. You know what I'm saying? Because at that point, World Stage was still ran by the stage folks who are all older. And I remember going down to the stage and waiting the entire night and not getting on.
Yeah.
And then years later, being a host of a spot and people signing up on a list and coming like, yo, I didn't get on the list. What the fuck? And I'm like, there's 49 people signed up on this list. Yeah. I love poetry. I'm not staying to listen to 49. We're not staying here till 2 in the fucking morning. Yeah. So, yeah, it was just I don't know. It's crazy. That time was just a different thing.
So I want to ask you about that though, because I was gonna save it till later, but this is a good transition. Like, there's this thing that happens with people that something doesn't exist, and then it does exist, and people treat it like it's the mountain, or like the sun, or like the ocean, like it's a human right to have access to this thing that they didn't build, right? And I say this with humility because I think I didn't like you for a while because I think I haven't felt that same thing. And then then like you get experience and you learn like, wait a minute, like it really honestly it starts happening to you. Then you think back and like, oh fuck, but a lot of people had a lot of resentment towards the lounge because they didn't get on and couldn't get on what was that like? Like to have worked so hard to build this thing, make it popular. Everyone's fucking, not everyone, but like a lot of people getting mad.
It was difficult because in the end, it's not like we were getting a thing out of it. We weren't walking away with money and like, yeah, we're killing this shit. We literally was still just providing a space. And most weeks we were coming out of pocket to keep the fucking place open. And so we're like, damn, there's only so much time we could be here. We don't own this theater. We can't stay here till 2. And the time used to be 1 a.m. We used to stay open till 1. And yeah, when you're young, 1 a.m. is 1 a.m. It ain't like crazy. But I'm like, after a while, you're like, dude, like midnight is good. Midnight is a good, and even midnight now for me, I'm like, fuck midnight. That's a lot. But to have people jump on it, I understood because I understand about having a lack of spaces, right? So there's the lack of spaces, there's a lack of knowledge of other spaces that do exist, which is another huge problem. And then you find the spot that you worked so hard to find, you all of a sudden you're like, they ain't gonna let me up? Oh, fuck that. And so a lot of that shit came towards me, which is totally fine. And I felt comfortable taking that because when I look at the group of us with the lounge, when I look at Dante, Poetry, and Jamel, myself, like they're so inviting to everybody. Poetry is out there so social and like especially Poetry is like hugging everybody and talking to people in a line. And then I don't know any spot, and maybe I could be corrected on this. I don't know any spot you can go to where the person who runs the spot is walking down the line talking to people and fucking before the shit opens up. I doubt there's a spot that does that. So Poetry did that shit all the time, and he does that to this day. So when there was so much of that, when someone was kind of like had their feelings, I was the one who didn't do that. It wasn't because I don't think that's important or because of whatever, but it's like that wasn't my personality. And I also felt like having something that was a circle, when you have a circle, if you let everybody into the circle, all of a sudden your circle's all fucked up. And it's now, instead of that shape, it's all like this and shit. You're like, that's not what the fuck we built. And so I wanted to maintain the circle to make sure it was still safe and still a place that we felt good in, because again, it was something we created. So, you know, when I started hosting, which was when we got to Greenway, because I used to host kind of second half at the old spot, but I really didn't like to host. And Dante and Poetry were like, dude, you need to fucking host, blah, blah, blah. And so when I became that person who was hosting all the time, I noticed that all the shit, anything that went wrong with the lounge was me. And I'm like, okay, like, it's not like you know what I mean? I can't control everything. Like, you know, we've had guns pulled out at the lounge. We've had fights in the lounge. We've had fights on stage. We've had so much shit. And it's like, that wasn't because of me. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's people's fucking own idea of what something should be that they enjoy. That's not up to me. Like, what you have in your fucking head and you expect to be don't mean shit. You know what I mean? And our intent also doesn't mean anything. I realized that too early. Like, just because our intent was to have a place that doesn't mean people want to take it as that. We want to have this space that people not everybody gets that shit. No one knows what the fuck's in our head, or even if we said it, not everybody who comes every week had heard that. So it's just what it's gonna be. And so we literally, it became a thing where when we first moved into Greenway was when Dante kind of went back to doing more acting stuff, doing his voiceover stuff. So it was Poetry and I. Then the Poetry kind of came along, and then Poetry went to Broadway, right? So I wasn't gonna move back to New York. I was very clear on that. I was very like, I love LA. LA is my home. New York is still home and still a place for me, but I wasn't gonna move back to do any of that. So Poetry left, and all of a sudden I was doing everything at the lounge with Jamel. And Jamel is the DJ. So people who are coming in don't view him as the same position as they did me, even though we are founders of the lounge. But because he's quiet and in the back and that kind of thing, it doesn't look that. So still everything came at me. And that was
and he had mixed
2 years. And he had mixtapes. and he talked to the girls, and I wasn't doing that either. Like, that was my thing too. Like, I didn't talk to nobody at the lounge. Like, I was big on that too. Like, I didn't want anything to corrupt the space that we had. So I was not trying to meet girls at the lounge. Like, I was very clear on what I wanted the lounge to be. I wanted it to be a space we could create in and build off each other. And that's what that was. Those early, when I look at those beginning years of the lounge, when I look, and that I'd have to look for, I have a list of an old lounge, like from like 2001, maybe 2002. And when I look at that open mic list, on that list is me, and this is before they were all regulars and whatever the fuck. It was me, Shihan, Jerry Quickly, Buddy Wakefield, Rachel McKibbins, Gina Loring, Poetry, Talam Acey, Bridget Gray, Nafisa. I mean, that list is fucking people who went and say cool. It's like a list of people who fucking did that. And so I think looking at it, like, I'm cool with the shit that I got because I think of what we created, and it created like a landmark spot. Like, it's a place that is just as known as New Eurekan.
Yeah.
Globally. And that was something that wasn't intended to be that, but it was just a space that was provided, you know? You know, even the people who run the door at the lounge. Like, it's a family thing. The four of us, it was a family. You know, and Justine Bay and Tiffany Scott and Ashley Hammond, Rodriguez, like all the people who were part of that group, that's the group. We were so fucking close. You know, the security who runs Clarence and Jakim and Kansas City, who's not there anymore, like that shit, they've been there from the beginning. Clarence was there from the beginning. Like a month after, there was another one called another dude named Wendell. Wendell was the first security guard. He brought Clarence, and we had them for years until Wendell moved back to where he came from. And then we got Jakim, and Jakim's been there for years now. And part of that was we're cool. We're all cool with each other. Like he calls, I call. Like that's important. You know what I mean? To have a space where people feel that is important. And as a someone visiting, it's important to see that. When you see the communal vibe of what it is, you kind of get sucked in, or you're hesitant and resistant to it. And I remember this. I remember to this day, we did an event where we did like an anniversary or something. And we did it at Raleigh Studios. And it was like a 600, 700 seat thing at the time. It was built to have that many people, right? And I remember this poet came, and he was like this the whole time. And I'm like, first of all, why'd you come if you didn't want to enjoy yourself? Right. Then everything finishes with the actual poetry segment of the thing, and everyone's just kind of relaxing. There's food, dancing, da-da-da. And people are dancing, and I look over at the poet, and he's kind of like just kind of like bouncing. And I'm like, and then after a while, he like slowly comes over, and all of a sudden he's dancing in a fucking circle. And I'm like, see, the whole time you were fucking angry about whatever, it could have been alleviated if you just fucking chill. We're not keeping people out. It's a thing of people to kind of come in. Like Poetry and Dante and Jim have done enough of this for people to be able to just come in on their own. And that don't even include the other people who just do that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I love what we've created. It's just interesting how, you know, even Def Poetry, how that created shit for us because of what it was and what it meant to people and what they made it mean in their lives, as far as validating whatever they felt needed validation.
Yeah. So what came first, Def Poetry Jam or the Slam Team?
Ooh, first. Def Poetry was being talked about when we were still at the Cabaret Cafe. The director came and he said, we're going to be doing a show. We want to talk to, before we're doing a show, I want to talk to you guys about something. That's where that was. And then we closed at the Cabaret and moved to Greenway, and that's when it was official. We're going to be that. And we didn't start a Slam Team at the Lounge until 2001. And oh shit, I was at my mother last couple weeks ago gave me an envelope, and it's the fucking flyer from 2001 finals.
Yeah.
It's literally, and it wasn't called the Poetry Lounge Slam Team. It was the Miracle Miles Slam Team. I didn't even remember that shit. I had to see the flyer to remember that. So 2001 we had the Slam. So 2000 Def Poetry started. It didn't go into effect until 2001. 2001 in the fall was when it was supposed to shoot. It was supposed to shoot the week of October. It was supposed to shoot the week of October. It was like October or September something. No, it was September something. September 11th happened. They pushed the production to October, and so we shot the season October 2001, and then it aired in February of 2002. So it was started before the Slam Team, but didn't make its debut until after we had a Slam already and team in existence. So yeah.
Okay. So I want to talk about Def Poetry Jam and kind of some of the things that were both like fantastic, some of the kind of like things that were unexpected, all things like that. But before we get into that, I want to ask you, let's talk a little bit about the Slam Team. So it's been one of the more successful Slam teams in the nation. Tell us about it.
We started the slam team. Fuck. We started the slam team because both teams were going defunct, right? So we housed them both. Our first year, we housed the LA Slam team and what became the Hollywood Slam team. And we did it because after Jeff McDaniel was like, dude, you need to do this. And I went. I was like, yo, this is a dope experience. I totally think other poets should know this exists and get to experience what it is. So we started doing it at the lounge. And in the beginning, it was the two teams basically were poets from the lounge. Like when I look at the 2001, our official year of having the teams, right? The two teams, the Poetry Lounge team was Bridget Gray, NQ, Nafisa, Monroe, Gnu, and Kai Scott, Tiffany Scott. And then the LA Slam team was me, Sekou, Omari, Poetry, Jaha, and Jamel. That was the team. Those were the two teams. And we went and we were in each other's rooms and hanging out, and it was just a dope thing. And we got to the official LA Slam team, just to kind of give it, we called it the last. That's what we were that year. The last was just LA Slam team. But we went and we made final stage. And we made final stage and we lost by a 10th of a point. And it was the first time we sent the team and the team made it to fucking finals and we lost by a 10th of a point. And we're like, yo, dude, we can fucking do this. I think we should totally fucking do this and just have it be a regular thing because it's a dope experience. So after that, it became, the way we set up the teams was that, and I'll just talk about the lounge from here.
Yeah.
The way we set up the lounge team was, I felt it was important to go because I looked at slam as an exercise in writing and performance only as that. So I felt like that was a time and a workout space to test shit out and to see what could be done given parameters. Because in an open mic, unless they give you the time slot, you can kind of do whatever. And at that point, people were doing 6 minutes, 7 minute pump, that shit. So to be given parameters, no process, no costumes, 3 minute time limit, I was like, yo, what can we do in that? And that was the goal, to figure out and push that. So we did that. Then I wanted people to go learn that what we were trying to get people to see was that it was more important what we got out of the experience moving forward than just the experience itself. I wanted people to go, yo, now I know what this means moving forward, right? So we prepped our people to kind of see what life after slam meant, what this like boot camp of competition meant in their lives, but moving forward, what it could do in other aspects of their artistic lives. And that's what we did. And we had fun. Like the one thing I know of all the teams we sent, like we enjoyed ourselves. People were laughing and joking, and we tried to make sure everybody fucking was comfortable and cool, and we didn't overrun poems. We wanted shit to feel natural, and we wanted to be comfortable and confident, and because I felt like if you're like tense like this, when that takes time to get out of. And thinking in boxing, like when someone's tight like this, they have to loosen up before something happens so you can see it coming. So if someone's comfortable, you don't know what they're bringing. So we were always so comfortable that, we're joking and talking and people didn't know we were about to try and fucking beat the shit out of you because the people were like, because for us, I never understood the idea that slam, it's not about the points. No, it's all about the points. I don't enter a competition to lose. There's never been a competition I felt comfortable going, yo, dude, if I just take last, no, I want to beat the shit. If I'm going to compete, I want to beat the shit or show my shit at the very least. Like there was a point we got into slam where we're like, yo, and that was my one regret in slam was there was a slam that I literally wanted to show what we could do. And I think it was a bad decision in hindsight. Like I was like, we shouldn't have did that because we were winning. We should have just fucking just killed the win and then tried the shit the next night. But I really felt like we won already. At that point, we had won already. That it was like, yo, let's show them like what the fuck we really can do. And so we made finals a grip of times. We won. We learned a whole bunch of shit. We stopped slamming for a while because I also felt like, even though we did slam once a month, I felt like people were coming into it like, you know, trying to just make a statement with their slam instead of like taking the whole experience in for what it was, or at least how we thought it was or should be taken in. You know? So yeah. Oh, real quick, Jeff McDaniel, not from Shalimar, son. Jeffrey McDaniel, white dude, professor at Sarah Lawrence College.
We'll definitely get to some of these questions, but you know, much like you built the lounge, I built this series, so you know, my questions first.
There we go. There you go.
But no, I'm fucking around. But no, you know, you're a really good sport, and I don't think a lot of people are. I don't think a lot of people understand the concept of like, you know, you play to win, but if you lose, you lose.
Right.
And like, the world didn't cheat you. You know, like you just lost. You know, like, and that's that. You just gotta like, unless you can prove somebody cheated, you know, and like and did some shady shit. Unless there's like, you know, you know, some evidence of like, you know, in the case of slam, you know, evidence that like, you know, you see people like making out in the parking lot or something like that. Like, you lost. You know, so like, yeah, I don't think people really understand that. Like, you know, it's okay to be competitive, but you gotta. I don't know. I think people like they politicize like hating these days.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. and moving on. All right. So Death Poetry Jam. How did it get started? Like, what? I know you mentioned that they came.
There's a million different explanations of how that started.
Yeah.
Wait, say it one more time. The last thing you said.
I said, yeah. So you mentioned that they first came to you. There was a couple meetings. It was kind of an idea, but like, you know, it expand upon that. Tell us the kind of the ins and outs.
So there were two different kind of, well, three really, that I saw stories of where it came from. Right. One was there was a dude named Bruce George, who's actually credited as a creator on the show. Bruce George came with this idea to Russell and HBO, blah, blah, blah. Then it was Danny Simmons, who's Russell's brother, who's very into the art world, dope-ass painter. And he grew up loving poetry because I want to say their mother had to read poetry and they learned about it that way, right? So he brought the idea to Russell. Then it was, those ideas were brought up. And then there was, they got to see what the lounge was and experience what that was in that kind of sense, because that's different than a lot of spots. So they saw the what kind of like what it could be, like the show of it, right? Because there's a lot of showmanship in regards to what the lounge is. And all of a sudden, they're like, yo, we're going to do a show called Death Poetry. You want to be involved? And Stan Lathan, who's the director, asked me to get poets for the show. And they would, which was kind of silly at the time in my head, now that I think about it, like putting my address on some shit and saying, I'm taking tapes, send them in, because I had to watch a gazillion tapes. And after I watched the tapes, I had to bring them up to Stan's office and we would watch tapes again and then make decisions on that. And then from that group, that would get sent to New York. Then there'd be pre-production, and then be the wall of all the poets. Kind of like there's like a little board back here with like postcards on it, right?
Yeah.
It would look like that, but it'd be a huge ass wall, and it'd have all these poets' episodes and poets' names. And we'd have to put the poets in place so that you didn't have a bunch of poems about just racism or poets about sexual assault. So you had to mix in and kind of create the shows.
Yeah.
And then, which is weird about that, because then when they edit it, that's not even the shows that people actually ended up being aired on. Like how we shot compared to what was aired were totally different ass things. So then the show went and went on HBO and premiered, and it was successful for them, very successful for them. But what they did, which I still hold as the reason it died, was they kept moving when it was, the time slots, right? So when you keep moving, if you're used to something being Sunday at 11 p.m., I know Sunday at 11 p.m. I'm watching Def Poetry. But if the fourth for the finale of the first season, they switch it to Wednesday at midnight, and I tuned in, and I just know and that's what time it comes on, then I am disappointed when I go in on Sunday, and I'm like, where the fuck did it go? And then someone tells me, oh, it was on Wednesday. But again, internet wasn't banging like it is now. It wasn't these boards and shit where people would be like, oh, they got moved. It's just it moves. And HBO ain't running the thing on regular ass TV for you to know the shit moved. And if you're only watching it when you want to watch what you watch comes on, you're not paying attention to that. So people would not know where it was. Then the second season, they did the same thing. It bounced around. And all of a sudden, people are like, I can't even find this shit anymore. Like, when it was supposed to be, it's not there. Da-da-da. And the ratings started going, and they're like, oh, well, it's not success. It's not working. And it's like, no, you kind of fucking killed it. You know what I mean? Like, that was kind of whack to see it go down that way. Then you had Broadway. You had the Broadway show come out of it. And the Broadway show was a great idea. The idea of it was dope. Yo, we're going to put some poetry on Broadway. In my head, it was going to be a show, like a scripted, put together a show using poetry. What it wound up being was an open mic on stage that they charged $75 for. To me, if you're trying to get young people to go to Broadway, putting an open mic on stage doesn't really make sense. Because in New York, yeah, Broadway's important, but there's New Eurekan, there's Bowery, there's Bar 13, there's Brooklyn Moon. There were all these spots. So it's like, why would I spend $75 to watch poetry on Broadway when I could see almost all these poets at those spots at some point for $10, $5 even? So they priced out the market of the people they wanted to come see the show. So then that didn't last. It wound up winning the Tony, which I think is dope. But again, it was a missed opportunity. They priced people out of the tour. You know, you're trying to get young people to go. Look, I love poetry. I love everyone on that show.
Yeah.
Maybe once I'll pay $75 to see that shit. That's not a return show. That's not a show I'm gonna keep paying to see my friends. As fucked up as it is, it's true. And so when you're like trying to get young people to go to a poetry thing, it's like you can't charge $75. You know, and I understand you have to mark up things, but teenagers ain't spending $50 to watch fucking some poems read on stage. And so, you know, I just remember those conversations about like it's the market is being killed. Like, you know, these half full houses, like you could fill them out if you had $25 tickets, even maybe. But $50 minimum and then up, it's like that's kind of hard, man, to get some kids to fucking pay for that.
Well, I mean, I think the $75, it's not so much the price tag, it's the production. I mean, like, if you're gonna charge people $75, you got to give them like, you know, I don't know, you got to give them, I don't know, people dressed like Hamilton or something, singing about rapping the Constitution. I mean, that's not an endorsement of Hamilton, by the way. But that you gotta do something like I don't know, a little different. I don't know.
Yeah, and so you know that kind of went down, and then after that was done, they tried one more. They did one more season after it won the Tony. Yeah, one more season after the Tony, and then that was it. And then there was talk about doing another season as an official final season. Like, we're gonna shoot the final season in the 9th Ward in New Orleans. Like, there was a full-on talk about it. Like, we're gonna shoot the final season of Def Poetry in New Orleans at the 9th Ward, and most wanted to do that shit, and it was been kind of a dope kind of setup. And then that didn't happen. And then Def Poetry tried things with other, you know, they did the Brave New Voices shit and whatever, and it's like it didn't catch the same because I think the novelty of what that was at that time, it was new and there wasn't shit else like it. You know, to put a poetry thing on in 2010 when the internet is kind of starting to come up, and I could see the old Death Fortune things. I could see new people shit like doing the same thing again wasn't really like a dope idea. So yeah.
Right. So a lot of people got mad at you because they didn't get on. That's your fault.
Yeah. But you know what? I will say this: there was a lot of that because I became a face for it, even though I wasn't the only one. You know what I mean? Also, the difficulty of that, which I don't think a lot of people obviously knew because they weren't privy to what was going on, but to put that wall together and to put a show together and to see, just for the sake of what it is, it's Matt Cedillo and Dante Bosco. And then I have to choose. No, wait. Let's stake it up. It's Dante and Portrait because they're both brothers. Those two names go up, and I have to choose which one of them gets to go on the show. And then, as a kicker, Stan will be like, you get to call and tell him which one. Like, that's fucked up. So then I'm calling my friend to tell him who didn't. That shit is the worst, right? So I got put in a weird-ass position, but I still think, you know, I know there were over 70 poets I got on that fucking show. So I know that I did, and I put people on that shit that that weren't my friends. Oh, a bunch, because if it was a friend thing, which a lot of people like, that he only puts his friends, why didn't I put Jamel on it? Jamel's my brother. I didn't get Jamel on the fucking show. I tried my ass off to get, you know what I'm saying? Or Omari. Or like, I tried my ass to get people on the show, and it just didn't work. Matter of fact, the person who did get it put on the show, I got put on the show because I made a phone call. Like, I got called and they said, yo, we need someone from LA and that does da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, yo, so-and-so. They didn't even see them perform. And flew his ass out there to do his thing. And I'm like, exactly. Like, that's what they asked for. That's what they wanted. That he fit the bill. He was exactly what they wanted. And they didn't air everybody, which is the other thing. So they don't air everybody who made it. So I had people who were upset at me because they got flown out and they didn't air. And it's like, that's not me. I don't make any editing decisions at all. I know the rules for the show changed over the course of the seasons, but it was like first season, they didn't want poems over like 3 minutes. I think the only exception that first season was Suhair Hamad, who did a poem that was like 6 minutes long, and it was right after the whole 9/11 thing, and it was about that situation, so they aired that shit. And then Amiri Baraka, because he killed that shit. So you had those poems, and then the second season, it was like, oh, we're going to do 2:30. Then it's going to be 2 minutes. And so people who were slammers and all that shit would fly out and think just because they were a national champion or a blah, 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 they're going to do their poem. And they're going to run it because their poem is so fucking dope. And then when it didn't air, they're like, what the fuck? What happened? And I'm like, dude, this shit was 5 minutes long. And you're not Nikki Giovanni. You know what I'm saying? You're not Amiri Baraka. So I don't think you should do that shit. So,
Mike McGee was I actually interviewed Mike McGee, and that happened to him. And he was cool about it. Not like,
he's one of them.
Yeah.
Mike is for sure one of them.
Yeah, and then he came back they invited him back, and so he was able to get on. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
and I want to say I want to say I have the video of the pre-taping, like when they're going over the rules with the poets, when Stan and Russell say that in the room with him there.
What was he doing?
Like literally saying, I don't care if you guys are national champions or da-da-da-da. If you go over your room, all over your time, you're going to get cut off the fucking show. I have that somewhere. I know for sure. I have them saying that for sure. And I had to sit at all those meetings. So I saw all that. So everyone heard the same information. So it's funny that Mike brought that up because Mike, for sure, Mike was under that. For sure.
Yeah. No, Mike is so cool though. Mike is such a gentle soul. But the funniest thing is that he looks like a retired Tank Abbott. The UFC fighter, so he looks like a fucking fighter, but he's the most gentle soul. He's a great guy, man. I really love Mike. So we're coming up in the hour, but there is something I want to ask you about. You're also
I'm totally
touring poet. Okay, cool. So you're touring poet. You've been international. You've been to you got to, in addition to like touring colleges all throughout the country here. You've also gone to England. Over the pond. How was that?
It was cool. Did I freeze? Did I freeze?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean the touring overseas thing kind of was a couple of different things. So I look at my shit. I don't remember years wise, but I remember sending emails to schools overseas first, right? And I was like, I've done this. I'd love to come to campus, blah, 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 blah. And my first two international invites were University of London, the School of Oriental and African Studies, and University of Massey, Wellington, New Zealand. And for the New Zealand one, the way that it was set up, and the way that I don't know if it's different now, but they could not pay ahead of time for my flight and stuff. So that would be in after the fact. And so I flew in on my own dime, did my fucking show, sold my CD, did the whole thing. And I was like, okay, I got to figure out what else I can do because I didn't know anything out there at all. And same thing with London. Like, they set it up. I spoke to the student, and they were like, hey, we'd love to have you. We'll charge this and this, and you get all of it. And I was like, what? And they were like, you get it all. And sold all those shows out. And I was like, okay, so now I'm going to figure out. So I asked them while I was there who else to talk to, what other places would be good. And I worked my ass off to try and get that shit. Like, I called, I sent stuff to people, and what helped was Def Poetry during their tour. I didn't go with them on the tour that went to Edinburgh Festival in Scotland, and but I went into New Zealand, and I was the only poet. First of all, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say only, but I hung out while we were there. I'm not a hangout dude, but I'm like, dude, I'm in New Zealand. I'm about to see what this fucking place is and see the city and meet the people and engage. And literally after every show, and this I can say I know I did. Every show, I went out and I hung out with people and we went places. We ate. I remember breaking bread, like going with this group that I winded up meeting, group of people I winded up meeting up with, and we went to the little like food spot. We chipped in, bought some chicken, some fire, opened that shit up on the car, and like we full on ate and just talked about things and just talked about culture shit. And like that shit was dope to me. Like, and I couldn't understand why no one really was doing that shit. I'm like, damn, we're fucking here. I remember, and that's why I think I love being there a lot and why I went back multiple times. I took Jamel with me. Like, I went there and it was dope meeting Maori people and saying and seeing, because there was a festival at the time called Pacifica, and they still have it every year, Pacifica Festival. And I remember talking to some people and them being like, yeah, it's weird seeing like being treated as outsiders in our own fucking country. And I'm like, and the parallels between that and the people I know here. And that shit was dope. And I wanted to know more about that shit. And so I made it my goal, or made it one of my things to figure out how I could go back there as often as I could. And so 2005, I wound up going 2 times that year. I went 3 times the year after. And the people I met weren't just poets, which was also a thing. Like, I wanted to meet who was there. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, that shit is dope, just meeting people. And like the first, I'd gotten there, and Ursula Rucker, a friend of mine from Philly, a dope poet, Ursula had just been there, and she went with Amnesty International. They brought her out. And so I met some people she met while she was there, and she was like introducing da-da-da. And then I met like a bunch of musicians and some of the poets and like the hip hop scene, and like that shit was dope to me. Like, and then the artists who I met who weren't like poets or singers, it was like digital artists, because Peter Jackson is like big on making sure people in New Zealand are working on his project. So he would bring the projects there to get them to work. And at that time, they were doing fucking King Kong. You know,
Wow.
like the first year I went, and it was an office no bigger. I mean, it was a tiny ass office with like 4 desks, and the kids who were there, I'm still friends with to this day. They created the New York landscape for King Kong. They built that shit in that little fucking office for 20-something-year-old kids. And then one of them created the technology that made it so rendering didn't take as long because the files, it could condense the file. And I was like, this shit, because that's not my world. And I just like to learn shit. So then going to the museums over there, like Te Papa was the name of the museum. And I'm just like, this is so fucking dope. Why would I not want to experience more of the fucking world? So I tried sending my shit everywhere. Every place that I could find information about poetry existing in that country, I was trying to figure out how to fucking send something to them so I could get there. And, you know, I got to travel, and I'm grateful for the opportunities. And, you know, obviously I'm not traveling as much as I did because I feel like, obviously I have a family now, but I got that fix in. Like the touring fix, I got. Just like the performing fix and having to be like, ooh, Shihan just did like that fix, that shit. I was lucky that I got that shit so early. You know, I was lucky. I got married fucking early. We had kids. Like we did all that early. That shit was great to do. So I got my fix of everything, like all those things. So now I could sit back and figure out how I can stay home more, do what I love doing, but not have to travel as much to do it. So when I do travel, I get to take my family with me.
Yeah.
You know, like I remember taking my wife when our daughter was 6 months old. I was working with a company, and I was like, yeah, to do it, you guys have to fly my family. And so that was, you know, like London and Japan and I was just like, this is what I want. I want these opportunities because I truly believe we are worth the same. Our value is the same, if not more, than the shit they're already blowing fucking money on. You know, and so that was important. Traveling, it was getting into circles where poetry had not been let in, and figuring out how to get them to understand what it is that we provide as fucking artists. I think, you know, and seeing the value and reaching the value monetarily with what I think is necessary to make that shit work. You know, and I think that's what's super important to me now as it was then, because I still think we're not still on the fucking footing that that other arts are being given, even though I think we provide fucking sometimes more than what those fucking things are doing. And not to share on other art forms, but I feel like what we do is important. I remember having an argument at University of Arizona, University of Arizona about pay. And they had just, first of all, I had this big thing about pay. I get to the school and, they have the newspaper, whatever the school paper is, right? And there's a full fucking article on there about how they paid Jay-Z $750,000 to perform at the school. $750,000, and y'all were beefing over me for $5,000 at the time. Like, really? And the concert ended up not doing well because they had Kelly Clarkson as the other person, and those fan bases don't overlap like that, so they didn't get who they wanted to turn out. So it was a half-empty fucking stadium. I'm like, and you're beefing with me because I want $5,000? Like, you're like, well, it's kind of hard because the budgets. I'm like, I saw the fucking newspaper y'all printed. You gonna tell me you don't have that money? You could have gave him $745,000, and I don't think he would have went, what the fuck? And what? Like, I don't think he would have bugged out. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I'm big on that.
But okay, so there's a big disparity between like the Jay-Z's and the other world, right? But then there's like this weird tier system, right? Where it's like there was a kind of a prominent author. I mean, not that prominent though. Somewhat prominent. I don't want to name names, but there's somewhat prominent author, and then a poet, right? And the somewhat prominent author was getting paid $15,000 to come speak, right? And good for them. And they had the opening poet getting paid $150.
Yeah, see, that's bullshit to me.
This opening poet, and I don't want any names, but this opening poet is someone I know very well, who usually commands anywhere between $1,500 to $3,500 for a college show, right? For the workshops, appearance for. So this is a working artist with a name, a recognizable name within the circuit, and like, I mean, this is the kind of shit that's like,
Right. But I think that's also comes down to stating value early on and recognizing what the value is early so that those things don't end up happening. I remember early, well, not early, this was later in my shit, but I remember a show, and to me, it was one of the dopest things I had remembered as far as poetry goes, as far as pay and all that shit. I won't say the school because I think I'll keep that part quiet. Maya Angelou was performing, and she was getting $125,000. That was amazing. First of all, that was what she was getting paid was amazing. I'm like, what? She was doing her thing on stage. Oh God, I remember this shit. She was doing her thing on stage, and she had like an assistant or like a person who travels with her, her manager. I don't know what that person was, and came out on stage while she was doing her thing and was like, walked off. She said whatever and finished. They paid for an hour of my time. They're getting an hour of my time. And I'm like, fuck. I would love that shit. That shit was amazing. You know what I mean? But also stating what it is and being like, yo, we need to let people know this is what we should be doing. And it's hard when there's so many and the opportunities are so small and so few and far between that it's hard to tell someone, say no to that. Because if you're not getting shit and someone's offering you $150 and you really fucking need it, it's hard to say don't take that. It's hard to tell somebody don't take $500 or even $1,000 sometimes. You're just like, yo, dude, like you can't do that. You can't do a show where you have to fly yourself in for $1,000. $1,000 to fly yourself in and put yourself up, and your performance fee is in $1,000. You're fucking it up for everybody.
right.
You know, and I think that's something that stating and understanding value and stating your value early can help prevent.
Right. But at the same time, $100 and you were so excited.
Dude, because at that point,
what school was that?
That was 90 UCLA. Wait,
UCLA.
Was it? I think it was UCLA. It's either UCLA or Occidental. I can't remember which one did the $100 first, but I know
UCLA is so goddamn cheap.
I was like, oh my God, this is like 96, 95 or 96 is when they did that, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, just to give context, most likely if you were a feature at a poetry spot, you got some like, thanks. That's what you got. I remember the Shark Bar.
Yeah.
This was one of my favorite shits. I remember the Shark Bar and being like, yo, they're gonna give you $25 and dinner. And I was like, oh shit. I called poetry up like, dude, I'm getting dinner and $25. Like that shit was amazing. You know what I mean? So when I first got 100, I was like, oh shit. So I get it, but the market has changed. Rent, I was paying $500 a month rent. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a different time. $100 then stretched. $100 don't mean shit. $100 now is us going to the fucking Wingstop or whatever the fuck.
All right.
And ordering some fucking food. Go ahead.
PCC, me, Mr. Poetic, David Romero, Def Sounds, $50 each, 2009, right? So I mean, it's hard to tell people getting their foot in the door, right? And Poetic and Def Sounds already done some stuff, but me and Romero, that was like that was early, right? And so like both me and him gone on to get the 4-digit checks or whatever, but like that is it. How do you get to the 4 digits without going through the door of 50 and 100, 150, right? 200. Which again, things up on
hold on, okay. I don't know where the oh, here's tape right here. Sorry about that. Sorry, just close the door, Papa. How do you go from
that $50 to like let's say $500 range in which you are messing up everything for everyone, right?
Right.
Is how you enter, and how do you tell people don't enter? You know what I mean? Because like
well, because I think they don't do it anymore, which is I believe part of that reason they can now bullshit a little more. Colleges and universities used to there used to be a book that had their marketing, their budgets, so their entertainment budgets. So you could find out exactly what a school you were interested in had for the semester. There used to be a thing, and it broke them down. And it was amazing to me at that time getting that book and seeing schools have $3 million a semester. And I'm like, what kind of programming are they doing for $3 fucking million a semester, right? So when I saw that, that was my help. And that was something that they don't have anymore, where I'm like, yo, but I also think now, if you go, dude, it costs $46 a unit to go to El Camino now, right? When I went to school, it was $5 a unit to go to El Camino. You know what I'm saying? And I remember people were tripping when they went to $10. They're like, $10? I'm like, you know, it's $46.
Yeah.
So that's broken down into whatever. The fees they charge you for all the bullshit they charge you, the fact that they get funding from the state, like all those things make you go, there's money there. Like this idea that they can't it means they don't want to. That's what that means. Because even something like Southwest College, LA Southwest, right? The first time they ever brought me out, they gave me like $1,200. And I was like, and that school is one building. I don't know how it is now because it's been a minute since I've seen that campus. But when it was a one building, and they were able to do that. I'm like, these motherfuckers saying they can't when they got sprawling ass campuses of shit. It's like, no, fuck, like I can't do it then. I can't. Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard when you're used to like struggle to say no to things that like that, to money like that. Like that's a hard fucking thing. But I think it's so necessary because I'm always thinking about what it means moving forward. Because if I only think about the current state of things, if I'm in a constant state of always in a constant state of struggle, then I will always think with that mentality of like, I need to just get what I can get. And it's like, nah, dude, because then if I try to go back once things kind of work out for themselves and I go, yeah, I need $2,000 now. They're like, we paid you $100 4 times. Why would we pay you $2,000 now?
Right,
and then I can see it from their point. Even though I think it's wrong, I can still go, yeah, if I paid $50 for something, you know, like gas. Gas should not be $2 and nothing cents at all. Gas isn't more expensive now. The technology they have to source that gas is more efficient now. There's no way gas should cost, and gas shouldn't cost more in fucking California because we refine that shit. So when I see fucking places and I see things pop up and they're like, gas was $1.50 in New York, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding? I don't know a refinery in fucking New York. We make the shit and our gas is fucking $3. You know what I'm saying? So like when you get the information, I think it's important to kind of like, first of all, I think we need to spread that information. I also think we need to have conversations about rates and pay so people know. Because I think people also feel weird about having that, but I think it's important information to know. Like, I think if we don't know what people are getting, then when someone says, here, $200 sounds good. If I break it down, when have I ever in my life really $200 for an hour? Like, when you break it like that, it's, yeah, I'm not going to get to $200 an hour sounds great because that paying job is an amazing job. If you're getting $200 an hour, you have a really good fucking job. Right? But I think we have to have those conversations. I think it's so important for us to do that, or we keep having the same shit.
Yeah. So like, I'm not one of these people that suffers like false humility or like I need to like pay dues or something. But when I remember you coming in line like Mindstate and you were talking about doing a college show, and I think you might even mention how much you were getting, and somebody or kind of the ballpark anyways, and somebody had approached me around that time, and I've only been doing it for like 2-3 months about coming to the campus. And I was like, wow, you can do college campuses for like, you know, like $3,000, $4,000. Hell yeah, I want to do this shit. And so then I ended up talking to somebody else, a poet, and I'm like, yeah, they want me to do this college. How much should I ask for? And I was thinking they were going to give me somewhere in the ballpark thing you were talking about, and they were like, we're just getting started, so maybe like 250, 300, you know. And that actually was not an unreasonable answer for the amount of resume I had at the time. Right. I was offended and mad. I was like, you're lowballing me, like, you know, like whatever. And it's because I had that attitude that I was able to do things later. But there is some truth to that though. Like when you're just starting out, you can't justify billing a college like $1,500, $2,000 on the
Right.
basis of like I featured at 3 places. It's not gonna fucking it's not
Right.
gonna happen. So like I don't know. There has to be some type of guidance or something, because you also shouldn't be doing it for free, and you also
Right.
shouldn't like fucking up the game. I don't know.
Right. I just don't think. I think people just have to get to a point where we feel more comfortable saying those things. I think that's the thing. Like, it's a weird thing because I do think there's the fear of saying something and someone else being like, "Oh, really?" Like, you know what I'm saying? Or I remember I've had this happen a few times. I remember telling a college, um, they were like, "We're really interested in having you. Um, our budget's a little, what do you think you could do it for?" And I was like, I could do it for $5,000 if you take care of my travel. And their response was, "Oh, that's perfect. We thought you were gonna ask for." And I was like, "Fuck! Like, I know I could have asked for more." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I get it. I do get it. It's always gonna be that. I get that. It's just I think the conversation still needs to be had. I think the conversation needs to be had. Like, so important. And I think so many people are uncomfortable with that and uncomfortable with hearing, maybe wait until you get some shit together before you do that. Because I don't know if you're necessarily ready for that. Because sometimes you could do that and kill the opportunity later on for somebody else. Because you go and fuck that up, or you don't have enough material. They're expecting you to do 45 minutes or an hour, and you really don't have that. And then they paid somebody who couldn't do the job, and then they're like, like the next poet, like, how do we know that person like, it becomes that. So I think it is a conversation. uh I'm always open. I'm always open for that shit, but I'm also curious how many people are really open to that.
Yeah. But then you get accused of being a gatekeeper and all kinds of other stuff that's just like it makes it not even fucking worth.
But it's like, it doesn't, at some point you have to be like, fuck it. It doesn't matter. Whatever you're gonna call me, you're gonna call me. It still is the reality of what it is. Like, I think it's
Yeah.
important. Like, when I found out how that fucking website where I found all the colleges, all the universities, all of that, like, when I found that shit, I was telling everybody who I knew was asking, and dude, I found this fucking site. It's a map of the United States. You click on each state, it gives you all the colleges and universities in the state. You click on the fucking college, it goes to their website. You go through, find all the emails for the like. And I went and did that shit. Went every college and university in the United States. That shit took, I forgot how long that shit took me to do because there were so many defunct emails and blah, blah, blah. But that was a lot of fucking work. But it was so necessary, and telling people what I was doing at the time, like, dude, I've been on the, like, sending this shit out, making calls, figuring out what my call, name was gonna be, and I'm like, yeah, so I'm calling on behalf of Shihan Van Cleef. I want to know
Yeah.
like this work. It's a lot of work, So.
Yeah. No, that's true. All right, so I want to end by talking about your book, but before that, there are some questions here. Most of these questions you answered throughout the talk. I don't know if you were looking at them and just like carefully weave them
Okay.
into your answers, but there's one or two here that have not been addressed. It wants to know. Fernando Salinas asks about finding slams during these times online. If you have any recommendations.
Lady Bosco has a list on Facebook. Fuck, is it the LA Poetry Scene or Open Mic? Lady Bosco has a list that actually has all the spots that she literally sourced from acting, from going and asking people to put, and it's a fucking full on thing. It tells you everything, every day of the week, their times and all that stuff. I think it might have like contacts or the pages for the contacts and all that kind of stuff. So do that for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Lady Bosco has one. It's like Open Mic LA. It might be that. LA Open Mics or Open Mic, something like that. So to find stuff. Because there's a lot out there now. There's a lot out there.
Quamel asks, is there any redemption for slam pioneer Mark Smith?
I mean, I think it's weird. I think because we lived in a hypersensitive, like, overly fucking jump on everything for every fucking possible reason. Like even when you apologize, like the apology is not the right apology because the words it's like you can never be right in a situation. And yeah, I don't on my own personal shit, I don't look at him as like the fucking slam god and the guy who created the fucking thing. But he did create a fucking thing. And to like shit on that just because he's a white dude is dick. He's still a dick and whatever, but he still did that. You know what I'm saying? So there's something to at least being like, yo, you don't have to fuck with his model anymore. You don't. You don't have to fuck with that model. And clearly it's dissolved. So there's space for the new model. So instead of shitting on that fucking model you don't like, make your own fucking shit. Like that's my thing. Always when people jump on shit like that is if you don't fucking like it, dude, make your shit. And then you have no reason to complain. So like people who don't like the lounge, so that motherfucker never let me make your shit. Create. No one has said don't make no open mic. Don't do that. No one has ever said don't open an open mic. Just fucking do it. And if it don't work, maybe there are lessons you can learn from what that shit is. Or you could have asked. So like that's my thing. So with Mark Smith, like yeah, and I think he was a victim of of believing the hype of like how people fed into the shit. Like them being like, like that shit is like corny. Like that cheerleading shit never played into my head. And I thought because he was older, I'm like, he's still fucking, you know what I mean? Like I get it, you know, but come on, dude. Like people have been competing over art for years.
Yeah.
Just calling it something else.
Yeah. All right, so there's like a lot of compliments and stuff, and people reminiscing. Here's a nice one. I enjoy Shihan's blunt and real personality. Much respect coming from Lionel. That's cool. Whoa, I like this one. It's all about equity and paying the poets the same scale they pay academics, especially administrators from other colleges. When they offer you all hundreds, but pay admins who are making six-figure salaries to come to our visit our colleges around the nation, they promote their book or research. It's not equitable, and for me, the students way prefer and get more out of slam.
I agree because again, I think there is something to the overall rebranding of what people think poetry is, right? Because especially in academia, they have this very specific idea. Thank you. They have this very specific idea of what it can be and what it is, right? So if it's not that, they're like, that's not poetry. And you're like, yo, dude, like I know what I do and what we do has more value than what the fuck y'all doing in this class. Not to shit on that because I do have friends who are academics and I believe in there's value in what you can get out of that. But I also go, come on, man. Like I know like my orating skills could fuck you up. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? Like I know my ability as a storyteller.
They're supposed to, though. They're supposed to.
But I don't. Yeah, but that's the thing. So I 100% agree with that. But I also think like we as poets, there's the beef between the people who slam and people who don't, and I think that's understanding what that is, and also being brought in and being labeled a slam poet. That shit does damage sometimes because like yo, like I'm not slamming. Like you bring me in to do an hour, I'm not slamming. Like where it's me telling you stories and reading poems. I'm not competing in shit right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's so many like different kind of layers, but I 100% agree with what Mary said.
And Mary's coming from San Bernardino Valley College, who
okay,
who's definitely they definitely I know Mary does anyways. They work to pay people right. So I'm gonna give a shout out to.
Oh, word.
Yeah.
So.
At least for me, anyways. I don't know. I don't know about your experience. I got pretty good. All right. So, and I know those experiences vary. So, yeah. So I want to talk about. Okay, I've had you almost an hour and a half now. Your book. You wrote a book.
Oh, so okay. So there's two different things. So there's my first book, which was Deciphering Gibberish, which was basically a collection of poems and stories that told my life up until a certain point. And that, you know, I wanted it to feel like a conversation. I wanted to feel like something you could just read through and go back and like look at certain things. So like there were purposeful mistakes in the book. Mm-hmm. There are things written in certain places as like little like hidden fucking messages that I enjoyed putting in there. But that was that. And the book now is it's called The Waiting Room, and it's basically um, it's a book of prose. It's a book of prose and a woven into it's a book of prose woven into a story in a waiting room. Basically, like it's about being in a waiting room. And I'm working to work out some of the kinks on that, and hopefully by year's end have that taken care of.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where can people connect to the ongoing the lounge? I mean, as you migrated online.
Oh yeah. So the Poetry Lounge, DA Poetry Lounge, it's like a Instagram and a Facebook page for it. It's every Tuesday. June 2nd will be our 22nd anniversary, and yeah, I mean that social media is where you can find out all the information, and then any information on me is posted there somehow, or through just my Shihan Van Cleef or the real Shihan at the different social media account things.
Okay. And where can people buy your book?
Apple, whatever, Apple Books, I don't know, Amazon, all those different kind of things. You get it in all the fucking little digital marketplaces, but all the physical copies are done. I will say that all the physical copies are done. I did a very specific run at the time, and that press, I mean, that was difficult to get done, but that's done. So all the physical copies, I think I have like 2 here that I have just to have, but yeah, they're done. Physical.
Any
So,
CDs
digital
or
copies of the book.
any CD? Is there anything anyone can buy here?
Really, it'd just be the book. Honestly, I have old CDs where it was like poems and shit, but for the most part, I feel like the stuff that I would be selling is coming. That's
Okay.
the best way
Well,
to
stay tuned to Shihan. He's got a large footprint on social media. He's not a difficult man to find. So I really appreciate you taking this time, Shihan, and it's been real.
All right, man. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
All right.